Welcome back. This is the SeeAudio collaboration with Z Reviews called the Rinko. Everyone else reviewed this a few months ago. I tried to review it a few months ago. Was shut down a couple times. Luckily, they released the white version, and now I have a chance to actually hear Rinko. So we're going to go through all this stuff pretty quickly because you probably saw all this a few months ago, but it does come with lots of stuff like that. And that, and that, and this. So you probably saw all that. You probably saw the box, and we're not going to spend too much time going on that. But this is what it looks like. This is the white version, so you get a nice clear, or kind of a semi-clear back, and the white faceplate. And I think what's most noticeable about this set is how thin this bit is right here. You know, normally sets are a little more chunky. This one actually has a pretty thin profile, and it actually fits pretty well. You just have to make sure it fits you right. And that sort of leads me to the tips that they included. And I think these are sort of special, custom, kind of hybrid. There's a silicone outer shell, which you can't really see. And then there's a foam interior and a sleeve in there too. But yeah, pretty cool hybrid set, not unique. There's a couple other hybrid sets out there, but this one does come with Rinko, and I thought that was pretty cool. Cable is kind of a thinnish, twisted 4-core SPC. It's okay. I don't know, it's okay. Nothing too special about it. It's kind of nice, kind of a cable that you've seen before in different material. This twisted 4-core version, this one just happens to be an SPC color, so pretty cool. So we will jump right into it and just say, like, a few months ago, lots of reviews of this set, lots of teardowns of this set. I think it became more famous for people tearing it down than it did for actually being reviewed. But so I will say, yes, kind of out of the box, there are some issues. It's too shouty, too unforgiving, and that's sort of the bulk of it. Is very unforgiving out of the box. It's for me, it really, and the included tips leaned right into the same thing. It made it even more shouty and a little more unforgiving. I said, like, out of the box, it did remind me of Stellaris. It's that overload of sound. You know, just pretty much a wow moment. You're like, wow, this thing is super intense. It's doing things that other sets don't do. It's just very, very intense. The stage seems really huge, but it's just an intense amount of treble, just the way Stellaris was. And then when you step back, it kind of just sounds like there's a lack of balance, and you really can't hear everything. You're being overloaded with sound, and a lot of it comes from that pinna area, and you just can't really hear everything easily. It's very much an overload moment. And I think the quick fix to this is to really just put something on the nozzle, whether you got to drop to 2 to 5K, 3 to 4 decibels, whether you got a 500 filter, you have micropore tape, you got to put something on the nozzle. And this is what I did. There's a micropore little circle there that just covers the nozzle, and that essentially drops it down 3 to 4 decibels. So it looks like this on the graph. So Rinko stock in blue, the reduced version in red. So you can kind of see this one has a super healthy bass curve. That is quite a lot of bass that you actually can't hear in the stock version. And that's the deceptive version about this graph, is this bass isn't super thick. It actually hits pretty hard, and it's actually a high level. But when you throw that much lower treble at it, it really overshadowed this by a lot. It was very hard to actually hear this, no matter how big that shelf is. This whole treble actually dominated the sound, and right out of the box, hard to really hear the bass, hard to hear the mids. The only thing you really heard was this. But when you look at it on the graph, you can kind of see what was going on. Is the tilt here out of the box is tilted up into the treble. Then when you throw some micropore tape on it, you can sort of start to tilt it down. And this reduction, I just stopped at 3 to 4 decibels just to get it essentially at the Harman curve. Those of you who know what sets at pinna area that sound like at the Harman curve will probably say that's too much, and you'll probably drop it a little bit. Your everyday set like cadenza is somewhere below the Harman curve, but I would say generally the Harman curve, above the Harman curve, is sort of like a no-fly zone. For me, I don't necessarily like too many sets that are floating above the Harman curve like that. But, it's kind of a personal thing. And when it comes down to throwing filters on it or dampers on it, how low you go is very much a personal preference. And I just kind of stopped there. But So what does it actually sound like? And kind of in comparison to other sets, I picked KZ-ZAX. It has that older hybrid feel to it, kind of a big bass that kind of carries over into the mids and a big treble, and you end up with kind of a big V-shaped sound, and that's exactly where Rinko goes when you bring this down and you start to hear everything. This kind of becomes more in balance with this, and everything starts to kind of piece together in the same way that KZ-ZAX did, kind of an older, fun hybrid style. So what falls out, like I was just saying, it's kind of a great EDM V-shaped set. Big bass, plenty of treble, to be clear, energetic, and tons of fun over that banging bass. Other genres are possible, but it really turns into a big V-shaped set, and genres that hit the big V are going to sound better than a lot of mid-centric things. So on the food scale, between fine dining, comfort food, kind of a refined, smoother, warmer, fast food, which I would call more V-shaped, this one definitely hits the V-shape. It's a little less natural, less organic sounding, but I do secretly like it because I like a big V-shaped sound, and I like balanced V-shapes, and I like banging bass. So lots of guilty pleasure things happening in Rinko when you put something on the nozzle. So on a track scale, I think Spanish Harlem, that mid-centric, fine, refined, detailed kind of track, it's not so much for that. Metallica's Enter Sandman, you're getting closer. I think the thunderous low end, the vocals don't come too forward because of that steep pinna gain. And that's really the hardest thing to get right on this set, is some vocals are going to be too far forward because of that rise. Some are going to be just right. I think Enter Sandman is pretty much getting there. And I said it's more of an EDM set, and I think the KLF's 3 a.m. Eternal from SSL1, that's pretty much my favorite track on this set. And again, it just kind of falls into the big V-shape EDM style. There are some vocals to it, but they're not the primary driver of that song, and I think that is the style of track and genre that actually worked really well for me on Rinko. So sound-wise, like I said, V-shaped. It actually does have a nice dynamic driver, and the planar that's in it is kind of planar. It really resembles a banging hybrid set with a really hard-hitting dynamic driver that isn't all mud. And I think a lot of people looked at the graph originally and said, this whole thing is just going to be a ton of muddy mid bass, and it doesn't really come across like that. The dynamic driver is actually pretty interesting on this set. So the bass wise, and oddly enough, I think my favorite part of the whole set was actually the dynamic driver, but you got to get the fit right. And like I was talking about, those tips just lean into a thinner, shouty thing, and it didn't really work for me, and it actually leaked a little too much bass, and it became noticeable. So I definitely would try different tips if you have yourself a Rinko. And then going back to JoJo, so I have this advantage of I heard JoJo before I heard Rinko, and JoJo, of course, was Z-Review's collaboration with Blonde. And that was a very heavy, very thick, mid-bass centric set. Very, very thick. It kind of absorbed all the sound right there in the mid-bass, and that's fun for certain genres. But it was super thick, and I think Rinko hits harder than that set, but still has an airiness to it. So the mid-bass, even in that shelf, looks crazy big, and you think it's going to really dominate everything and be, just swamp the mids. It actually doesn't. There is some airiness to it. There's plenty of treble in this set. You can actually hear the vocals over the mid-bass quite easily. It's quite clear, and it takes on some of that planarness right there in the vocals and the treble. So those aren't dynamic driver mids and treble. It's actually a lot sharper and a lot more defined and a lot clearer than what you're thinking. So I think it actually worked out. Maybe it worked out by accident, but like I just said, it doesn't absorb all the life out of the track. There is some airiness to the bass, and it comes off as big bass, big treble, set in balance. If you mod it, I'd not recommend buying it unless you are a big bass level fan. I mean, you can't get around the fact that it's a big bass level, but it's a little less than, in your ear, it sounds a little less than what it does on the graph, but there's no getting around that you have to be a big bass level fan. So the mids kind of caught in the middle, kind of a V-shaped problem where you're caught in the middle of the stock tuning, which was kind of unworkable because of the upper mids, too shouty, too unforgiving, but it actually gave you more of a sense of this planarness to the driver. It added really nice detail and nice resolution and really nice extension. But when you add a damper to it or you add some micropore tape to it like I did, it sort of cuts that back a little bit. So a little less planar detail, less resolution sound, but it takes on that super fun V shape and you can actually listen to it for more than 5 minutes. The mids are much cleaner, like I was just talking about. The mids are a lot more cleaner than what the graph would suggest due to the treble level and this driver, and it's really sandwiched between two better parts, which is exactly why I gravitated towards dance music to electronic music. When you kind of step away from the mids, the bass is actually pretty fun. The treble is planarness to it. There's something really interesting about the driver that actually intrigued me. Also much harder to hear the coloring with electronic music. Treble-wise, I think the tuning and the driver make it really difficult to listen to instruments. Not really bad, it's just colored and inconsistent. I think electronic music really sounds much better here. And if you listen to electronic music that's really spread out across the treble, I think that actually worked out quite well. The planar driver does seem quite capable, whether you call it a planar driver or not a planar driver, but it probably needs another revision on tuning to have it sound a little more natural. Plus the big V tuning to it, it's just really harder to get a feel for how this would sound, knocked down a couple levels into a more general appealing tuning and level. Once you drop to the lower, I think you can hear the upper clearly. So the micropore, I think that actually did pretty well to knock the pin down to the point where you could hear the upper clearly. And I think it does handle the upper treble and the extension closer to a planar than a dynamic driver. There's something special there. It actually does a really good job at that. There's something special lurking underneath this thing. I'm not sure what it is, if it's really good or kind of so-so. But the tuning kind of hides, I think, what was there in that driver and what the driver could really do on a more natural style tuning. So yeah, I think there's something there. I'm just not sure the tuning that they did for it was the right idea to really make it shine. Stage-wise, I think that really took on most of what I mentioned about Stellaris. You throw that much upper treble into a set like this, and it ends up sounding really, really large, really great imaging, very sharp, just a huge soundstage. You get a similar effect on Rinko that you did with Stellaris. The Stellaris was the exact same way. It had extension for miles and it had kind of this really big, wide sound to it. And not many $100 sets kind of have that much space or sound this wide, high, kind of around the back. I think it actually did that quite well. Just a lot of space between instruments, and that might not be appealing to everyone. I thought it was pretty cool because you don't hear it every day. But how that much extension and treble works in your ears, I think was very much that's up to you. I think it's kind of like exactly like Stellaris. You throw that much high frequency at someone's ear and you're not sure how their brain is going to process it and if it's going to sound strange and congested or overload or too much. But in any case, it did something kind of interesting for me, and how it works for you, not so sure about that. So that is what I got on Rinko. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.